Hello and welcome to episode 352 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leakes. Now, Damien, we're back. It is a new year. Obviously, we had the New Year's episode in the last one, but we're going to let people behind the curtain a little bit there. We wanted to have a Christmas, so we pre-recorded that knowing what it was going out on the 2nd, but we truly are in the new year. So how are you doing?
Well, you say we wanted to have a Christmas. Ironically, I didn't because COVID came to town in the Damien Fay household. So unfortunately, my children got COVID on Christmas Eve. So we were in lockdown for the whole of Christmas and into the new year. So it was one of those things where you're trying to, like everybody, so many people it impacted. It feels like it impacted everybody over that period. So it is great to be in a new year because we are obviously back and out. And the positive, I actually never got COVID at all, despite my family members doing so. So I am excited to be back in the new year, full of optimism. And as you pointed out, Andy, we've picked up a lot of listeners in the interim period since we last did the show.
And actually, that's what's kind of inspired this show. And so as you know, Damien, and I think I've mentioned it on the podcast a few times before, I'm not just a podcast co-host, I'm a podcast enthusiast. I've probably got 20 to 25 podcasts that I listen to regularly.
I mean, we always hear about it. It's a running joke in the office that Andy will turn around and say, I was listening to a podcast today, or I heard on a podcast, and we now laugh about it because Andy listens to that many podcasts, and I should listen to more. And I hold my hand up. I don't listen to many other podcasts, actually, to be honest with you. So Andy is a true podcast enthusiast, both in the development and producing of podcasts, but also in the listening more than anything else.
And actually, it was exactly that got me thinking it's the new year. And I myself have started to listen to a few new podcasts, about being happy, being productive, that kind of stuff, new year, new you, all that kind of thing. But it drives me insane when you join a new podcast and you join further down the line and you can see that there's maybe 1 or 2 years worth of podcasts in the back catalogue and people make references to things that you haven't listened to yet and you don't feel part of the story. And it's frustrating because there are often times when you think, oh, what are they talking about here? Or what is this podcast actually doing? I kind of get it. I like it. I like the presenters, but I don't wholly know what I'm actually signing up for here. And I thought it was a great opportunity, having seen the stats and know that there's a lot more listeners out there that are listening to this very podcast, where we could just explain it, tell the listeners what this podcast is, what Money to the Masses is, even how it started, and for you, Damien, to explain all the different ways that the listeners of this podcast can engage with Money to the Masses to make a better financial future for themselves.
Yeah, and if you are a regular listener, what we're going to be doing is touching upon the things that, as Money to the Masses, that we do that you probably don't realise. So the podcast is only a fraction of what Money to the Masses does. It's a regular show, and so people who listen to this podcast, this will probably be one of the main ways, could be the only way, which they regularly interact with us. And I mean, it is a big way because they listen to us for at least half an hour every week, but they won't realise that there's lots of other things that we do that would be useful for them, that they might want to engage with and don't realise exist because they don't make it onto the podcast, because a podcast is a very particular medium, and some of the stuff that we do wouldn't translate to being used on the podcast. So what we're going to do today is go through the services that we offer, the things that we do that people might be interested in. And even if you're a regular listener, I very much doubt that you are aware of everything that we do that you probably would like and could consume. So I'm going to just start, Andy, and you just chip in along the way, because Money to the Masses is a personal finance website. It was born out of a blog that started, well, it's almost going to be 12 years ago now. In February, actually, it will be 12 years. So it very quickly grew into what it is today. So a personal finance website, and with offices and employees, and Andy being one of those. And it was born out of my own personal experience of working in financial advice in the City of London, and the frustration that I was working in an industry that was servicing very rich people, but the masses weren't being served by anybody. And this was before the money advice service came around, and even when that did, it was very much debt focused. So what I did is start giving away that information, that knowledge, which costs lots of money, for free online. So I started explaining to people how to invest their money, how to build portfolios, because that's what I did for a living, providing guidance on pensions, mortgages, insurance, all those things, and then also going into whole areas of personal finance like budgeting, etc. And then the podcast came along about probably 4 years into that journey, didn't it, Andy? One day you and I sat down and said we should do a podcast. Would people listen to a podcast about money? And we just thought, well, we'll just do it. And it obviously was incredibly popular. And so now it's one of the biggest money podcasts in the UK. We've had occasionally have meetups with the people who listen to the show. We're desperate to do another meetup because it's been a couple of years now because of COVID. So we do meet up with people. We do have a bit of a community that's built around this podcast. And so I ended up leaving my original job because Money to Masses grew and it became the site and the service that it is today. So if you are listening to this podcast for the first time and you are thinking, well, how does it work? Generally speaking, we will cover 3 topics every week. So 3 pieces of evergreen content. We try and keep it evergreen so you can go back and listen to past catalogues. Because for me, I find it frustrating if you have something that's very contemporary, very of the now, and then it's basically tomorrow's chip paper. And we therefore try and produce evergreen content, which is why people go back through our back catalogue. Now, the shows are numbered if you want to go back and look at them. Andy's done a lot of work in numbering all of our podcasts. Probably the best way to find stuff to do with the podcast, if there's a topic you're wondering whether we have covered in the past, we probably have, is to go onto moneytothemasses.com, which is the website, and then go in the search function. Now, if you go in the search function, type in anything, you'll find all content on the website that's relating to that word that you've put in. But if you put the word podcast after it, then you will find the shows of the podcast that refer to that. So that's how I go back and find past episodes of this show when I refer to them. So when I tell you to, say, for example, go back and listen to podcast 179 where I cover something, that's how I found it. It's not because I've got this mental catalogue of everything we've ever done. That's the quickest and easiest way to find old topics. So if there's topic that you think, have we covered it? We probably have, given how many shows we've done. Search it in the search bar. If you just put the word in, you'll find all content, podcast and written. But if you put the word podcast after it, it'll more likely bring up the podcast episodes at the top of your search term. So that's the first thing. So the site is really the focal point of everything that we do. So all roads lead back to Rome, and that is the website. So every episode that we make of the podcast has a page on our website that includes the resources we talk about. I know the show notes for these episodes will include links. Andy makes sure that they do. But if you go to the website, then there is a player on there that enables you to listen to the podcast as well. And you can leave comments if you want. But we are also putting abridged transcripts of our podcast now on there. It's a difficult job. We try and do it most weeks, but you will find that that helps with the search as well. So you can see some abridged transcripts of the podcast shows as you go along. So make sure you do go to the website. If you go on there, we write a hell of a lot of content. Now, we've got an editorial team that writes lots of content. We even do some news type content that doesn't make it to the podcast that you might find interesting. And there are always insights into our contemporary news pieces that we do. So we have an editorial team at Money to the Masses and covers all the key areas like debt, mortgages, investing, protection, pensions, budgeting, all those areas, things like insurances, pet insurances. We have people who write about those topic areas, and most of that content doesn't make it to the podcast because it wouldn't make great listening. And one of the things I really wanted to point out to people is that if you ever want to know about a product or service, then there's a very good chance that we've reviewed it. So we write reviews about nearly everything, whether it's an investment platform, whether it's a car insurance or pet insurance product, whether it's a crypto exchange. People don't realize that we now write quite a bit of crypto content, but it doesn't necessarily make it to the podcast. And that's because doing a podcast, which is just reviews of services out there, would be really tedious and boring and not interesting to everybody. So if you want to find out about a product or service, go and look on the website, type the name of that company in, then you'll probably find that we have done a review on that particular product. So that is something that people won't realise.
And Damien, it's probably worth mentioning, we don't mention this enough on the podcast, we do have deals with some of these products and services. So if you use Money to the Masses to look at the review, you may find that you can get, say, £25 off a will, or maybe you can get fee-free investing for a year, or perhaps even £100 cash back on a life insurance product. There are deals available on there that we've secured with partners that we have reviewed and that we trust. And that's our way of passing it on to the people who read the website and listen to the podcast. But also Money to the Masses makes a little bit of money on that as well. And that's how we make this free for everyone.
Yeah, and of course, the way we do it, we're very upfront. If we ever do make money, the reviews are unbiased, doesn't make a difference. Most content that we produce, so like 95% of the content that people use, isn't being monetized by us. We just provide it for free so people can use it and be informed. But if people do want to help us, that's great. But we always provide a way that they can get through to that product or service and not click on an affiliate link, for example. And therefore, we wouldn't in any way get any reward for that. So we're very transparent about how we do things, and it's very particular. If you listen to this show, you will know that's because of the type of people that we are, and that's what Money to the Masses stands for. One of the other things I think people don't realise is that we have a weekly newsletter. So this podcast comes out on a Sunday, but we have a Sunday newsletter that comes out as well. And that newsletter contains a bit of commentary at the start from me, but then it contains a roundup of the important stories that you should be aware of from that week. And it's not just our content. This is curated across the internet. So the best stuff that's out there and we think you should be reading. And that covers all areas of personal finance. And I mean, it's incredibly popular. I mean, we have tens of thousands of people who subscribe to that newsletter every week. But also we do a roundup every Sunday of the best of the money sections in the newspapers. So if you go and buy a newspaper, they will have a money section on a Sunday. Well, one of the team actually get up on a Sunday morning and do a roundup, pull together all the links to the stories from those different publications and put them in one post. And I mean, we don't shout about it enough. I mean, it's one of the most popular parts of that newsletter. And we put links through to our videos and things we've done that week as well. So it's basically a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about finance. And that is contemporary, that's news stuff. So if you're getting the evergreen content from the podcast, then sign up to the newsletter. And you can do that by going to moneytothemasses.com/newsletter, and you put your email address into the box, and then you'll be subscribed to it. Moving on from that, there has been a community built around Money to the Masses, and we enabled that a couple of years ago. We did a live event and people asked for a community aspect to what we do, and the live event was very successful. We met a lot of people who follow us on the podcast or whether it's newsletters, etc. And so we created a Facebook group, and that Facebook group has kept growing, and now there are thousands of people in that group. So if you go to facebook.com/groups/Money to the Masses, that group is a group where you can go and talk about anything you want. It's obviously money orientated. People can ask questions. It's a very friendly environment. I mean, we have a really strict policy on that. We don't have any judging going on in there. We have it so it's a friendly place that people can share and get answers. There's a lot of very smart people in there who have share their experiences as well. And there are some people who are professional advisors too, who can offer their help and views on your questions. And also we do go in there from time to time as well and communicate. So it's a great way of being part of something that's built around Money to the Masses that's in its own image. And I suppose I should therefore talk about the social stuff that we do, because we do a lot on social channels now. So Twitter is Money to the Masses with a number 2. So make sure you go and follow us on all our social channels, which I'm about to tell you about. That is bits of our content pushed out and occasional sort of musings from me. So it's a bit more personal. But most listeners and readers, and I know, are on things like Instagram and Facebook. So what we do, we've got the community on the Facebook side of things, and we've got a Facebook page as well where we will put up our content for people to read. But Instagram is one that we're really using a lot. And I'm going to come on to a 28-day financial fitness challenge, which is being based on Instagram actually at the moment. So Instagram, we put on clips of the podcast, we put on snippets of me talking about things. Content is actually often different to what you will hear anywhere else. So all the way through December of 2020, I was doing a lot of 21-second videos where I was explaining money concepts that were quite difficult in 21 seconds as a bit of a challenge. And I'm going to continue doing that going into the future, but that's the only place you can find that stuff. And so it lends itself to that platform, and that's also on TikTok. So we're on TikTok as well. So you go and find Money to the Masses on both of those platforms. Make sure you do and you follow us, because we do give you a bit more insight, a view behind the curtain, to use a phrase that Andy often says, that on Instagram in our Insta stories. We might put stuff about what's going on in the office so you can see much more about Money to the Masses, but also snippets of content that might be reviews or questions that people have that I respond to that won't ever make it onto this podcast because they're very short and they're very timely and they live in that medium, which is Instagram. And so if you go onto our Instagram account, we now have the highlights. You can see where we pull together some of the content that is related. So that, like I said, the 21-second stuff where I was doing those short videos. One of the things that we got on there is the 28-day financial fitness challenge, which I will also come on to. There's quizzes on there that we do. And one of the things that I also want to mention is you can find the daily deals that we do. So in 2020, we decided that we would put out a questionnaire to ask people what they wanted. That included listeners of this podcast. And one of the things that they said that they would like that we didn't do was deals. So that was deals on things that you can buy. So what we did is Jordan Cox, who's known as the Coupon Kid, now does a daily deal for Money to the Masses. So he goes and scours the deals out there and picks the one that he likes the best, and he publishes it on the Money to the Masses website. If you go to moneytothemasses.com, you will see at the very top menu the word deals, a hyperlink. Click on that and you will see his page that he updates every day with a deal. And so follow that page, bookmark it, but you can also find those deals on our Instagram account because we share them via our Insta stories and we bookmark them. So there'll be lots of people here who don't realise that we actually do deals. And Jordan is the best around when it comes to finding deals. And if you recall, we did a Black Friday special last year where him and I were chatting about all the best deals out there. So make sure you go and follow us on all of our social channels. So that's TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And then that leads me on to YouTube. Now, YouTube has become a much bigger thing for us. And we now put out content all the time on YouTube. And that includes the reviews that we do. So I will sometimes do video versions of reviews of products and services. And the team also are on there as well. Lauren did a whole series of millennial money videos, which she still does, which focuses on money for a younger audience. And she also did a series of videos about her house buying journey as a first-time buyer trying to get on the property ladder. That lives in YouTube. You can find it via Instagram too, but that was something that was very bespoke to those channels, but we've never brought it onto the podcast because we've never felt it would work as well on that medium.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, Damien, in terms of our YouTube content, there is at least 3 videos going out most weeks. And those videos tend to be things like reviews, the midweek markets, because that's recorded as a video podcast. Obviously, it goes out on this podcast feed, but actually the full video to that. So if you want to see Damien in the flesh delivering that to camera, you can do that over on YouTube. And there's also stuff as well like budgeting. Lauren does a lot of the millennial money stuff on there. So there's plenty of content on YouTube. Like I say, it just keeps arriving every week, 3 or 4 videos every week. So do subscribe to that and it helps us as well.
Yeah, so please do subscribe to all these channels because it does help promote us and into the algorithms on those particular channels. And the thing is, you'll find content you didn't realise that we did. And I just want to pick up on midweek markets. If you've subscribed to this channel, you may have seen a midweek market episode drop. Now, what that is a review of the investing environment, what's been going on in the last week or so and what to look at in the future on investment markets. So investing is really my thing that I love. I have a specialism and expertise in that environment. And so part of Money to the Masses is to bring investing to the mainstream and to help people understand it. So really what I'm doing is explaining what's going on in markets. So when you look at your investment portfolios, you understand what's going on and therefore it starts to spark a bit of interest and therefore hopefully people then really enjoy investing and they stay investing for the long term. So that comes out every week, typically on a Wednesday or Thursday. It depends what's going on in investment markets because sometimes I do it on a Thursday if there's an event that I know that's going to move markets happening on the Wednesday because obviously American and European markets time zones are different. So if I know, say for example, the central bank in America is going to be due to make an announcement, then I might hold off until the Thursday. But like Andy said, that show is put out as a video as well, which I think is particularly popular. People quite like seeing me actually do that to camera. And it's the same show whether you listen to it on the podcast feed or you'd watch it on the YouTube channel. It's the same audio, but it will give you an insight into investing. I know there's a lot of people who just particularly like that show because it's just free content helping them understand what's going on in the investing world. And that then leads on to a whole nother area that we do at Money to the Masses, and it's called 80/20 Investor. Now, 80/20 Investor is essentially a service. It's the only paid for part of what we do. And it is a service where I effectively teach people how to invest their own money. So it's not advice. What it is a service where I produce very bespoke newsletters every week. So I write a newsletter, which is an investment commentary that goes into a bit more depth than anything you get on midweek markets, that will be very bespoke about what's going on in markets, what to look out for, with charts and diagrams. And I then do a monthly review as well. So I'm always providing that information so people can make informed investment decisions themselves. On top of that, there is obviously fund data. We do a screening of investment funds out there to produce tables of funds based around momentum investing, which is a particular style of investing where you try and ride an unfolding trend in order to try and optimize your investment returns. And so that is based upon an algorithm that I built many years ago. And so people can use that as a bit of information that they can then perhaps decide how they're going to invest their portfolio. On top of that, there are tools in there like stop loss alerts. There are things like a chatterbox facility where basically it's almost like a forum where people can ask questions. This all happens behind a paywall, so you have to be a paid subscriber to that. But it is cheap. The idea was we wanted to make it accessible to people, so you can get it for the equivalent of £12.50 a month. So the idea was to bring lots of value and help people make informed investment decisions. Also on there, I run my own portfolio in there. So I run a £50,000 portfolio, which I started doing back in 2015. So we're now like getting nearing year 6 of the existence of this portfolio. So I've been running that with £50,000 to show people how I would pick a portfolio. It's not necessarily for people to follow, but the idea is that people write investment commentaries and all these things in the mainstream media, but there's never any conviction in what they do or proof that what they say actually has any validity. So they could say 1 minute that, yeah, these are the sort of funds that people should be investing or themes, and then next week change their tune just because the market's changed. They're never actually putting their money where their mouth is. And so what I decided to do was, look, if I've got to do this. If I'm going to sit there and say this is how I'd run money and whether it's a valid approach to be able to invest your own money, whether people could do it, I had to demonstrate that I would invest my own money, which I have been doing successfully now for 6 years. And so you will see there that what I do is I tell people what I'm doing at the time I'm doing it. And then you see the fruits of that afterwards. So, I mean, I called it a £50,000 portfolio. It's now not. It's about £77,000 worth of money. So I just keep that invested and just show people how I do it. So that's something that people may find interesting. So you can go to the Money to the Masses website and find out more information about that. But again, that is something that occasionally inspires pieces on this podcast. So some of the investment research, because I also carry out investment research pieces on there, where like I might take a theme and say, how would you find funds that could do well if inflation keeps rising? And then I'll explain how I do it. So people could go away and do similar things, and I show them what the results of my research is. Just teaching people how they can do their own research. And sometimes bits of that make it to the podcast, but a very diluted version, because obviously the paid for content is for people who subscribe. So that's another thing that we do that many people might not realize who listen to this podcast. And of course, then we've got to move on to the Money MOT. So the Money MOT, again, we don't talk about it enough on the podcast, was a tool that we created a couple of years ago and launched. And it was born out the idea that people often wanted to know where to start. How do they just sort their money out? And if you're listening to this podcast, you might be thinking, well, I want it to help me sort my money out. And of course, we get lots of great reviews from people who say, listen to this podcast has helped them achieve whether it's financial independence or retired early, or whether they've just got their money sorted and feel better about things and got on top of their money. We wanted to create a journey that people could go on. So the Money MOT is just like what a car MOT is. So it's a tool which we will put a link in the show notes. Again, you can find a link to it on the Money to the Masses main website homepage. The tool is basically 12 multiple choice questions. It will take you about 2 minutes to complete, and it's anonymous. You don't have to put any information in about who you are if you don't want to. So you answer the questions that go along and basically ask you questions about your current circumstances. And what it will do, based on the answers that you put in, it will then throw out a grade for you. It gives you like a report, a review. So it might give you a grade that might be a C, a D, or a B, or whatever. And it's pitting you against other people in the UK, people who've taken the MOT as well. And obviously there's tens of thousands of people who've done the MOT now. And it will look at each section of your finances, whether it's your bills, whether it's to do with your investments, your pensions, all areas of your personal finance. And it will give you a star rating out of 3 that shows where you are and where you need to improve. And then what you can do if you want is you can then sign up to an action plan. And what you will do is put in your email address, and then you will get a email series which you can decide whether you want it daily or weekly, which will prioritize the actions you need to take in order to improve your finances and therefore improve your grade. And you can do the MOT again once you've started going through that plan and see your grade improve. So the whole point is it's non-judgmental, but it gives you a tool and a mechanism to very quickly see where you are and then to make those improvements to be able to better your finances. And the idea is you do it every year. Like a car MOT, you have to do it periodically just to make sure your car is running smoothly. It means that it's roadworthy. That's what the money MOT does. Make sure that your money is roadworthy. And that is incredibly popular, that tool. But now we've done a final thing, which you'll find that's based in Instagram, which is the 28-day financial fitness challenge, which is something we've launched this year in 2022. And what we wanted to do is to encourage people to start the new year and start to try and take an action plan to try and improve their finances. And it complements the money MOT. And at some point during the 28 days, I will get you to take the money MOT. But some people need a little bit more hand holding and they need to have the action points broken down. And really the way money works, you need to own it, fix it, and then grow it. That's the mantra that we're using around this. So it's a slightly different way of doing it. So you imagine you get people who do these fitness challenges to get themselves fit. This is the money equivalent. And what we're doing at the moment, and this is at the end of week 1, we're still in the own it phase. And we'll be in the own it phase until the end of next week, where we're completing a black book. And the black book is basically a summary of where your financial position is. So you're owning it. Whether it's good, bad, doesn't matter. You're just trying to put down on paper, stop burying your head in the sand about where you are. And then we'll move on to this fix it stage where we start giving you tasks to improve your finances and fix any problems that you have. And then ultimately the grow it phase is where you then start trying to grow your money and improve your circumstances and ultimately achieve goals that you want in the future. And so it complements the money MOT, but it's a bit more of a hand-holding strategy where you can build a sense of community around it as people do it together. Each day I just give people a simple task to complete. So go and have a look at the 28-day challenge. You can find it on Instagram. Again, there's a highlight that contains all the information and links to where you can find the resources on our website to take part in that challenge. And it doesn't matter if you didn't start it on day 1. You can start it whenever you want. You could do it in July if you liked. You'll find day 1 and then you can follow through. And the idea is that you complete each day task sequentially and you don't skip days. And if you follow it, then by the end of it, you should be in a better position than when you started. In fact, you will be. So that's the idea of the 28-day challenge, is this progression of doing small bits and pieces as you go along. The money MOT you will do as part of it, but some people won't necessarily follow the plan if they don't have somebody like me giving them a bit of motivation, a bit like a personal trainer, if you could draw an analogy in the gym world. So somebody who gives them a bit more motivation as you go along and a bit of an explainer. So I think I've covered everything that we do. If you want to ever look for comparison stuff, so I know people think about buying products or services that they want to compare products and prices, then do go onto our website. If you go to moneytothemasses.com/compare, you will find a page which enables you to go through to compare the best savings rates, junior ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs, trading accounts, robo-advisors, pensions, SIPs, mortgages, estate agents, life insurance, health insurance, income protection, over 50s insurance. So you can see we provide those comparisons on our website. So do make sure that you see Money to the Masses as a hub of your finances, that you do come back. There's a lot more that we do than just this podcast. So hopefully, Andy, people listening to this who have been long-term subscribers have suddenly realised realise that actually there's a hell of a lot that these guys do, and I'm only literally got the tip of the iceberg, and they will realise that they can use Money to the Masses to improve their finances, and along the way they can also help us because it enables us to keep the service free. Because if you're going to compare products with Martin Lewis and he ultimately might get paid, it'd be incredibly helpful. We'll just do the same thing. You can help Money to the Masses along the same lines. And I think we're way too modest. In fact, you told me off for this, Andy, previously, saying we're way too modest about trying to encourage people to support what we do. And we're often just hoping it happens by osmosis. But I think people do like to help and support things that they do like. And so if you can, then that would be great. Always go through, look for the offers on anything that you're going to do. Look at Money to Masses first, or as well as any other resources you use online.
And while we're talking about supporting what we do, it's a great opportunity to ask the regular listeners of Money to the Masses podcast who haven't already. Here's your New Year's task for you, is to go and review the podcast if you can. You know the score by now. If you listen to podcasts, you'll hear everyone talking about this all the time. If you can review the podcast at your platform of choice, give us 5 stars. It helps the algorithms and helps us spread the word to more people. Obviously, if you're new to the podcast, don't feel obliged to do that just yet. But when you can, that'd be lovely too. And just quickly before we finish this podcast then, Damien, I think it might be good to give especially the new listeners, a little flavour of how we come up with the content and what may pop up on the show in weeks to come.
Yeah, so the way the content's done is no fixed planning that goes in. Before each show, I sit down and plan the content that could be on it. I look around for things that may be happening in the world of finance and then want to provide insight. We're always trying to provide insight. And so we're always focusing normally on one piece of investing related content. I like to try and keep at least something that's related to investing every week. And then the other 2 are really up for grabs on what topics they will cover, but they'll be personal finance. And so you can influence what that might be by sending in questions or requests. And people do. People have sent in questions and requests about content they'd like to see or things they don't understand, and they make great podcast episodes or topics. So make sure if you're new to this podcast, there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's the one thing I want people to realize about money. If you're thinking about something and you don't understand it, I can guarantee you from my experience, there are tens of thousands of people who are thinking exactly the same. So don't be afraid. Do write in. You can email me directly, damien@moneytothemasses.com. You can email Andy if you want, andy@moneytothemasses.com. And then we will endeavour to bring it to you on the podcast. And the other thing, do also get in touch because we do like giving away Money to the Masses mugs. It's the most prized asset in the entire universe is the coveted Money to the Masses mug. And so periodically we'll just give them away to listeners who might, for example, give us a glowing review, or they just done something that we deem mug worthy, and that whatever that may be. And so do keep in touch. We do love hearing from you, and we like to build a sense of community around what we do. And hopefully this year we will get chance to do another meetup and meet up with listeners. And it's always great fun when we go to the pub and we just get a whole load of people who just rock up, take over a pub and just enjoy each other's company and have a bit of fun, because we are fundamentally very nice people.
So that is it. We finished the podcast on Damien saying we are fundamentally nice people. We are. And those who have been with the podcast for many years, 6 or 7 years we've been going, thanks for bearing with us on that one. I know you may have heard some of that before, but hopefully there's something there for you to take away too. And so that's it, Damien. We're done for this week. You can get in touch with Damien, as he mentioned earlier, directly, damien@moneytothemasses.com. Twitter, it's @moneytothemasses with a number 2. Don't forget to go over to Instagram. That's where the 28-day challenge is. And so, Damien, until next time.
Until next time.